What's up, Calvin?
Yo,
Welcome back.
that's right.
Did you have a good week, dude?
Yeah, it's been going pretty good so far.
Yeah.
Covering, covering. Had a mild rib injury from working out and showing off to everyone all the time.
Swole.
So I'm obviously extremely fit.
No, savage. I actually just went to the gym for the very first time in like three
Oh yeah,
years yesterday.
yeah.
I got sick to death of it, and I went back to the climbing gym around the corner, and it was
Oh,
just
okay.
like, okay, we got to do this. Like, this has been ridiculous. 3 years of sedentary life has been
Yeah,
embarrassing.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I
Just
bet all your
embarrassing.
friends are constantly doing some fitness thing because that's what people do around here.
Stop, man. You know what I mean? Look, back in the day, we used to climb all the time. I was climbing outdoors constantly, ropes, everything, just doing like, all the adventure stuff. And then lose my job and lose everything else in between.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
Christ, you know what I mean?
I'm wondering about that. I'm wondering about the pandemic because I know when the pandemic hit, a lot. I mean, anyone going to the gym stopped going to the gym. I'm kind of curious if there are numbers about like how many people have returned and how many people are like, you know what, I am done with fitness. It's been 3 years. I don't really care anymore.
I don't know. I just think it's just difficult. You know what I mean? Because the big thing for me was going from like 155 down up to where I'm at now, 210. Like that's a huge jump. That's a huge jump. And you're
Yeah,
talking to somebody who used to run every single day. You know what I mean? I'd be up and down Chautauqua. You know what I mean? I'd just be doing backpacking trips all the time. You know what I mean? It's just like this is very unnatural for me to be at this weight. And now we're getting into the spring, summer. It's getting hot. Like I can't fit into my t-shirts, dude. I feel awful. Like I feel
climbing must
terrible.
suck because that extra weight is like a little person on your back.
It's
You must,
madness.
yeah, yeah.
It's madness. So you over here doing muscle ups like a fucking legend, absolute
Just
savage.
just
Nah,
doing it for warm ups,
nah,
But
sorry.
but
Nah,
hey, let's go to the meat of what we want to do on this podcast, which we're gonna talk about how LeBron got swept and how does this affect his
let's go
legacy? Getting
Nuggets. Let's go Nuggies, dude.
this is
I
what
want my
the
golden Nuggies. Let's
yeah.
go NBA Finals,
We're
baby.
gonna go on a world tour. If they win, I'm gonna buy 10-piece nuggets from like every fast food that I know. If they win,
That would
that's
actually be
what we're
hilarious, to be fair. That would be fair. That would be hilarious. No, to be fair, I missed the last game, stupidly enough. I didn't even realize it was on.
yeah.
Um, but I caught the one before that one, and that was savage. Because it was nice
They're all close.
being at a bar, and then everybody's just fucking screaming and shouting, you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
We don't get this very often around here, so we're just
No.
enjoying
Denver sports, not very good sometimes. Not very good. The Broncos? I guess when was
it.
the last, you know what I mean? But to be fair, we did win one a couple of years ago, so no
Yeah.
worries, whatever about that. But yeah, we can't keep those streaks up. Oh my god, I went to a Rockies game. Not to keep us on this fucking thing, but I went to a Rockies game,
Uh-huh.
and in the first inning, right, Phillies versus the Rockies. The Phillies get a grand slam and hit our fucking pitcher and knock him out.
Wow.
It was like the first play of the game. There's no, like, well, not the first play if
Man.
it's a grand slam, but they have four bases, score 4 points, and fucking knock our main pitcher out for the first inning. It's like
It'd be funny if somebody just got up and left at that
at that point, it was one of those moments where you're like, would you ever just stop? Come on,
point.
just what the fuck is this? Like,
Yeah. I mean,
uh,
for the Nuggets, I hear that like obviously, the stadium's like absolutely packed now. So like, how filled was the Rockies game?
I find this across all American sports, and I don't know why this is, right? They sell a lot of tickets. You might have like 60,000 people that have like bought tickets, or that's what they'll tell you the attendance is. Half of the people are in the seats. Like it's like the stadium is half full the entire time that you're there. There's like a
Mm.
lot of people who just walk around. But there's also, in a weird sense, and this is like coming from Ireland and European sports, right? We don't have like things like bars and restaurants in the stadium. So
Oh,
going to like what was weird, like going to a Broncos game, we went and saw the Broncos versus the Chargers, the last game of the season last year or this year or whatever it was. Um, there's like an MGM bar, like restaurant. So somebody has like bought a ticket for a seat and then goes to the MGM bar and watches it on the TV when the game is right there. It's happening literally like
yeah,
out in
yeah, yeah,
front of you.
yeah, yeah,
And it's like, why? I don't understand why you do that.
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't get that at all. But the Rockies was kind of fun though because like if you had shitty seats, you could just go to the bar and actually get some like good views that are a little bit more like level. But we had some awesome seats. But yeah, no, genuinely, I just like I think like most people just mill around. It's like most people are just not even in their seats watching the game, going to these things, which is crazy to me.
Hmm.
You know.
Gotcha.
Holy shit! All
So
right, burn 15 minutes on fucking
that's okay.
sports.
Yeah, we came to the conclusion that LeBron is not the GOAT. But anyways, let's continue.
All right, game dev. So where we left off, right, was we're talking about getting into the programming or into the prototyping, which is getting into the programming, I guess, in a lot of ways, right? Where we need to kind of go now, I feel, is saying while we are making our first prototypes, how do we evaluate those prototypes? How do we honestly to look at them and go and say, what needs to happen here to get to a game or get to our first gameplay loop? What is, I think a big thing that I always come back to is what is core, right, to our experience. And also, what do we analyze to actually go and say, what should we be prototyping? Right? We might have like this big idea. Oh, I mean, it's an MMORPG. It's blah blah blah. It's this, it's that, right? Well, you probably don't want to prototype your fishing mechanic if you're an MMORPG and you have this big expansive list of feature sets that you need to have. So, to me, it comes down to what is the moment to moment gameplay? What is that one thing, that one action that players are going to be doing the most within your project, and start kind of there, right? This might be combat. This might be a spells system. This might be, your if you have a abstract puzzle game. This might just be your puzzle mechanic, and just focusing in on the one thing that actually is going to be the thing that the player is going to play almost the most, right? Um, you might have a different opinion there of just like how do you actually pick that thing and how do you
Yeah,
actually break that down? Because I think this is a big moment where you have to actually go and say, take my idea, break it down to the components.
yeah. You know, we have these conversations, and my answers are always evolving. I think I would have absolutely said what you said. Honestly, not even that long ago, but for some reason, you jogged a new thought in my head. Um, so I think it was because you brought up the fishing. I
The
think,
shit. Yeah, yeah.
well, okay,
Turmoil there with the fishing games.
yeah. So when you bring up prototypes, I've always conceptualized it as you're trying to answer questions as you do a prototype, the best way you can. So I think if you're doing, let's say you're doing, I don't know, you're doing a match three game, but for the meta, you're doing, let's see, I don't know. So you're not doing narrative, you're not doing Candy Crush. Let's say you have a new model for the meta system,
Hmm.
Monopoly. So let's say you have your match three core, and then you have a God, what's the popular?
Oh,
I don't,
what,
I
like
don't
Coin
remember.
Math?
Ludo King, like one of the first ones to make one of those Monopoly mobile games.
Oh,
There's
okay.
there's Monopoly Go, there's Ludo King. Anyways, let's say you decide to have that be the meta. Then I think that's the biggest question, because I don't. I, I mean, it's a slightly hot take, but I don't think you really even need to have the match three prototype done early if you are completely sticking to match three, because you don't really have any questions there. Um, I mean, you might want to know metrics if you've never done it before, but if you kind of know that match three is fun and that people will stick around with it, then prototype the big question, which is this meta going to be interesting, sort of thing. Is
Sure.
actually how I would prioritize it.
No, okay. No, yeah, then change the approach then. Yeah. So it's whatever the risk factor is. You
Yeah,
know what
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean?
Exactly,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
Again, trying to mitigate the risk, but finding the unknowns. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
If something is
yeah.
quite known, but you know what I mean. What I would say is also it's like I guess this is where it depends, right? And you know, I mean, we should preface this like Calvin comes from a long line of building prototypes constantly, like for trying out different ideas, different techniques for building new stuff. Like your game jam stuff is a big proportion of being able to go and say, hey, let's explore a new idea or a new facet of something else, right? And a lot of times these things almost turn into, you know, real products at the very end of it all, and a couple of months later, and you kind of make that no go decision of like, is this worth my time or not worth my time, which I really respect as well too. So I'll give you that. If you know something is as known as match three, then it's like, all right, well, we probably don't need to do that. We do need to go and build that, and we do need to
Eventually.
put focus into that because that's important to a match three player. That's the only big difference I'd say is that like when people are playing match three games, they're usually playing match three,
Mhm.
right? That is the focus. So there has to be a lot of understanding of what is my mechanics there, and is there a way that I can possibly evolve that genre? Because right now it is the same formula in terms of even upgrade progression within the difficulty curves, right? Like you get the same, you know, the same IAP, you know, consumable, free use tools that you have. The hammer to knock one, the bomb for something else. You know what I mean? Um, there's only been a few games that have really tried to like really push the boundaries there. I think Kit and Match has done like a great job on that when they came out in 2019. Uh, but what is the most unknown part of it? You mean I think it's evaluating like what that is, you know, because people are still going to play the meta system, so trying to drive them into that and making sure that that stuff is all as core as possible, I think is obviously important. But you know, how do you go and plan that out? That's the biggest thing for me, right? When I do that, that's when I'm trying to get to first playable, right? Is when I'm trying to push for that side. And you have to be very cognizant of where the cut lines are, right? Because when we're saying, hey, I got to prototype my meta system, we're really saying we got to build the game loop. Because the only way, you know, I mean, you can have a play, win, get money button, right? But you don't get the timing of the beats
Yeah.
of when I get in and out of gameplay. You don't get you sit in the outer layers and you don't get that kind of moment of like, okay, well we're going into this thing to like for a couple of minutes, or we're gonna go and do that for a couple of minutes, waste all of our energy, drop the phone, come back a little bit later, collect some stuff, blah blah blah, right? So for me, I think that those things can be very difficult to actually really like find the thing. You almost have to go really hard cut on your features, social features out, get rid of those, they don't exist. What is, you know, is there timers in the background, is it core gameplay, you know, is there some sort of setup things that you're doing or upgrade path that you're doing on the other side. If you look at a game like um, Jesus, I want to say Coin Dozer, but it's not Coin Dozer, Coin
Coin
Master,
Master?
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Where you know you bring up Monopoly, like that the Monopoly Go game or whatever that's out
Yeah.
now started as this X statement of Coin Master plus Monopoly equal big success, right? So where do you start from there? You start kind of like how do you integrate the IP into that style of game? But in a lot of ways, you want to kind of start on what, you know, can I actually even make fun and engaging moment to moment gameplay? Because the outer loop realistically is a lot of like spend upgrades, right? I'm just spending money for currency that I've gained from this other gameplay loop to kind of push into this whole thing. Now there's attacking, there's collectibles and all this other side of things. But part of that I think is like a little bit more like on the Board King side, the gachapon keeps you there as the collectibles, and you just want to kind of like Pokemon get them all. But is that's the sticky, but it's not like the thing that you're not necessarily like the one thing that's going to keep the player in the game. There's still something else that needs to drive you there a little bit more. So I think that there's like a left and a right here where it's like where you would say, can I even make something? Can I even make this style of gameplay sticky? And we're talking about mobile here. I think when you get out into like the console market, it's like a little bit different, right? We're talking about like a fighting game, or we're talking about an RTS, or we're talking about like an FPS game or something like this, or a puzzle game by itself. Like there's something a little bit more, core that you can really split into right there. Like, hey, like I'm a flight sim. Like, well, great. Let's make a fun plane, and let's make one, and then try to figure out what do we learn from there, and then scale that up. But on mobile side, it's like it always feels like a little bit different, where you're really trying to plot the path around this whole, core experience of the player, coming back, returning to the game, coming back, returning to the game, trying to find that glue a little bit more,
Yeah. Yeah, I think the loops tend to be, I don't know. It tends to be like a tight loop that like the meta systems are driving you around for mobile, and then for a paid game on Steam, it tends to be like you have your core loop, but it's like stretched with a lot of content. Tends to be the difference,
Yeah.
and that does lead to at least I don't know if you want to jump into evaluating your prototype, or did you still have thoughts there?
No, we can definitely do that. I mean, I think that there's we haven't done this side of things justice. I don't think, just in our own discussion here. So there's obviously more to explore, and more just to kind of like even just talk about, not even really making a good judgment or picking a good call there. There's a lot. If we actually had one or two different versions of something, we could really drill down and say how would we go and break this up. But I do think that breaking up your problem and stat ranking what
Yeah.
your feature sets for your game, what the needs would be, is a big point in going and taking that starting side of saying, can I even actionably make this game, right? Um, Again, going back to the idea, I've always had this like throughout my entire time making games, where one person goes and says like, I'm a solo dev and I'm making an MMORPG, and it's like, no, you're not. You could be. Maybe you are. Maybe you are. Fair play to you if you are. But it's not going to be massive. Maybe it is massively multiplayer and online, but it's going to take you 4 years. It's going to take you 6 years. And you're going to have to be good at what you do before you even get there. And maybe it's not, you'll never hit it because you don't know optimization, and there's a lot of shit that you don't know. Um, but fair play to you. Keep going. Actually make it. To get to those points, you actually have to go and look at your design overall and say, okay, on paper, just on paper, what is it actually going to take me to go and make this whole thing, or at least just a core loop of just the core thing. If it is like an MMO world or something like that, like an RPG world, I always start with, what does my first like village look like, right? What does Pallet Town look like to me in terms of in Pokemon, right? What is maybe the movement then from Pallet Town to the next town, and what is the content in between those things?
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and just starting from these building blocks of, okay, well, now I have a starting point to try and build an experience. Because I think where I try to go to here is like, especially if we're on Steam or something like that, how do I get you to a 30-minute demo? How do I get you to something that then I can also be pitching, but polish that experience up? Say that this is the game, and we're going to scale that into the long side. That'll also help you then to go and say, great, I have this polished experience. I know how to build it on from here, because everything else is going to be plus one, extras here, different mechanic, change up the gameplay over on this side. But this 30-minute experience is the thing that I'm going to send over to publishers. That's what I'm going to send to my friends. That's what I'm going to go and get playtest feedback on and say, is this good? What's good about this? What's wrong about this? Please tell me what is wrong. Objectively tell me what is wrong. So my goal is always to get to that point within all of these things, right? And I think that comes down to sitting down in a spreadsheet, walking through the feature list, being realistic with yourself, thinking through the whole idea, doing like what I would call holistic game design, really trying to like put some stakes in the ground for like what would this thing actually be in the end, and then scaling all of that back to something that is objectively like, okay, well, that I actually have no idea about. I don't know how any of that works. So maybe that is something I do need to prototype, and I do need to work on it a little bit in a silo, find something there, and then come back and say, okay, great. I think the other side of it too is that you might have too many ideas, in a funnel position where you're like, there's 100 different ways to do a fishing mechanic. How do I go and say that this fishing mechanic is better than this fishing mechanic? And I think a lot of that comes down to, one, do it dirty first. Just have a click button, get fish really fast, and have that as part of your loop. And then start drilling down into those things and then saying, well, what does this mean to me? How can I make this engaging? How can I make this a little bit more fun and entertaining without necessarily like straight copy ripping somebody else's like thing? I mean, there's a lot of great games that are just fishing games, right? So do I want it to have, it comes back to like goals and first principles, right? Just putting these stakes in the ground, I think are extremely important. So, I mean, we can definitely go on from there, you know what I mean? But
I mean, I totally agree. I think you nailed one of the core things. So we're in the scenario where let's say you did a game jam and you kicked out like the most fun prototype there is. That doesn't necessarily mean you can take it to market, because you touched on the honestly, at this point, I think is the number one thing, which is content. You can't have your game jam's a 10-minute experience, and let's just say everyone loved it. But if it's a type of game that is very difficult to continue creating, clever content for or whatever to keep people going, don't do it. It's a bad commercial game. Unfortunately, there are some really great games that have less than 2 hours. If you're under 2 hours on the Steam, in Steam, which is the refund threshold, you're gonna actually get bad ratings and you'll get refunds. So you do have to clear that.
I mean, yeah, that's where I think like replayability, obviously it has to be the core. When
yeah, you need replayability or content or something to keep people going. And you're right, with like I guess the MMO idea, but actually, let's go back a little bit to so Monopoly Go is a game that's like Coin Masters, but in between they have stages where I'm in New York, and then they have all the New York. They have like 5 key New York buildings, and then you go to like Egypt, and you have the pyramids and whatever. And when I saw that for the first time, I was like, how many artists do they have on this team? Like, there's like 100 cities, and they all have unique models, from what it seems like. So, like, that'd be something that you would want to actually prototype out, even if nobody really sees it. You got like what you said is like, how long does it take for me to make a pallet town? Okay, that took me 20 hours to make.
Yeah.
That means I have something I can punch into my spreadsheet and then realistically figure out how long it takes to finish the game. And this is really important. I know indie guys don't like to think about this. I know this for certain. They don't like to think about the cost of content, because they're usually like, oh, whatever. I'll just like make it on my weekends. I'll get it to speed up. But you do have to take a business approach to this and think about the cost of production. And that's, I guess I can't emphasize it enough that content is going to be king, and you got to figure out your cost of content.
Yeah, a big portion of this is just, can you execute against your idea?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I think for me, you're right, there's a number of different approaches. Like, a lot of people come with the idea first and then kind of drive in, into the actual building of the prototypes then off of the idea, which is grand. I come into it, from the commercial side, where it's like we have a hole in the market to fill, we have something to do here. And then I go back to like that Facebook article that I was showing in the last video. What are the things that players want in that space? what are their goals when they're playing these types of games, and then how do I go and then break that apart into my game's goals. And I always come back to this thing of like, there are game pillar goals, and I usually write about 10 or 20 of them and kind of like throw them to the team and say, great, like here is the pillars of this game, right? uh, Dog Shelter Story. It's like, you know, um, or no, I go back like Swing Striker, right? For Giant Fox, right? One of the big ones that I have is competitive at heart, but light-hearted about it, right? So this is a competitive game when you're in it. We want this to feel like a competitive game when you're there, but it's very light-hearted in that sense. So it's not trying to be the next, the next Omega Strikers. It's not trying to compete with those people. It's trying to be more gang beasts, where it's like more entertaining and engaging competitive spree in a short period of time that also just doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things at the end of it all, right? It's not supposed to be a brawl, it's a punch up in the game. You come up with a bunch of these things, and those are going to be your North Stars. These are your things that you want this game to be. These are the pillars that you're going to then design everything else around, and hold up your designs to these pillars and say, do these designs support my pillars, right? Like everything that I'm actually going to go and design for the prototype, for the actual game, for the content spree, what this thing is going to turn into should support my pillars. And that's going to help you to go and then refine your lens, your perspective lens, when you're looking at your game and evaluating your design and evaluating your ideas before you've even really put pen to paper. Break these things up then after that. Every feature should have two, for me, I always have two sections: user goals and product goals. And this is important. As a user, and I use those statements, as a user, and I write it like a user, what do I want from this feature? What do I want to drive through in this feature emotionally? How does this fit into my gameplay? What is the feeling overall that I'm supposed to get from this actual feature? Then the product goals. How does this fit into the overall portion of the game? What do I want as a designer? What do I want the user to be feeling when they're doing this type of mechanic, this type of gameplay? And also monetarily goals. Where does this fit into the actual like side of being able to make a profit off of this thing as well too? So those things can all kind of compound into themselves. But user goals, product goals, try to write about 3 per feature, and then use those again as the backup of like, when I'm writing the big fucking blob of like, what is this thing gonna do, and all of the little nitty gritty rules and breakdowns, how does it boil back up? How do we pull ourselves out of the focus point, right? Of one feature, one little thing, one little nitty gritty moment, and say, wait, but like, what are we actually doing here? What are we building this for? And that'll help you as well too when you have multiple designers or multiple different people, because everybody can go back to the pillars and say, does this hold up to this? It's like, great, we have loads of ideas, but what ones actually support the pillars? And a lot of the times when you're in those early stages, you can write pillars and throw them away, but at some point try to lock them in. And I try to say lock them in. It's loads of different camps here. If you just want to make something, go make something. Don't worry about pillars. Just make something. If you think it's going to be fun, go make it and see what it is. But then after a while, start trying to think while you're making it, like, okay, well, if this was a game, what would this game do? And how do I want this to fit into the player's like life? Like, what is the thing I'm trying to actually like push forward here? But yeah.
I think. Oh.
No, go on. No,
Finish
sorry. I already finished it. Yeah.
No problem.
Watch me ramble for another 20 minutes on bullshit, for sure.
Again, sometimes I wish I had differing opinions, but usually, I mean, you're saying the right things, and I only have more to add on to that. with some of my anecdotes and
Well, how
stuff.
do you mean the big thing for me would just be how do you do it at your scale? Because at my scale, it's like
Yeah.
a lot of the times I'm afforded that time to kind of like get in there. A lot of times I'm not afforded that time to even think about these things. Some of the games at these bigger studios they don't do any of that, right? It is just
Oh, that's
like
interesting.
it is just what what I would call it kind of like more piecemeal designs. Like
Yeah.
you build a foundation, a little building block, and you build that little core loop, and then all of a sudden you put all the puzzle pieces together and you see if it fits. And if
Sure.
it fits, then it's like, okay, well, cool. Like, let's just keep building on top of that, and you make everything very, very cut line, like a heavy, heavy cut line, and just keep adding on top of it.
Yeah.
I don't think that necessarily puts you in like a great directional play. It gets you somewhere, but getting somewhere is not necessarily like, well, if we could go back, how would we go back and go and make this thing what we actually want now with our learnings, right? So I try to prioritize like more focus up front, more paying attention and trying to play the game in your head a little bit more. A lot of
That
people can go against that though. I don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense to me because the smaller the team, the more agile you are, and the more you can move around. But when you have this big hulking beast of 100-man team, and you start piecemealing like this direction, it is quite hard to change everything. You can't be like, hey, you know what? This isn't hitting the pillar. We have to scrap it. That's
Yeah.
very hard.
Even a
But like,
30 person team, you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
Trying to
yeah.
keep
So
everybody fed, everybody trying to keep them all moving. You got
yeah,
programmers looking for work. You can't sit down and just be like, I'm going to design for a month. You know what I mean? It doesn't happen like that. So,
exactly. So you're definitely right. If anything, if you're on a larger team, you got to really stick to those initial pillars because if you start deviating, it's like you're gonna be cranking on that wheel trying to guide it back.
yeah, talk to me though, look real quick. You're going into a game jam, right?
Yeah.
You get your little theme or whatever else like that, right? What's just the quick 5 minute process of going from theme to all of the breadth of ideas to refining down to like finding that thing?
A recent lesson, or not recent, but as I've been doing these more, I will say, and I don't do this, but when you do have a lot of designers of equal say, you absolutely need pillars. It is so hard to communicate and so hard to agree if you don't have pillars. And I need to do that more because sometimes if you have a team that's like generally pretty agreeable and agile, you don't need any pillars. Technically, I mean, you should, but it's just a little easier to maneuver. But you know, in general, it's safer to have some pillars and then uh, I don't know. I don't have any one quick tip off the top of my head, but we usually just throw out ideas and then the typical diverge and then converge into 5 ideas and you give it a pitch and you hope
Mm-hmm.
for the best. There's not too much time, so you should only spend like an hour brainstorming at a game jam. So
You're hilarious.
you
Yeah.
you're just you simply have a deadline, which is what causes you to create an idea.
Yeah. Okay. You mean yeah. Part of this is also not to harp on this whole thing.
Uh,
It's important for me because if you are just trying to, everybody can have an idea of what that game is, but
yeah,
if you don't have pillars, you don't have something that you're going to go and mash it towards. People will have diverging ideas of what that one idea is, and everybody might go and say, and like, yeah, I think I know, yeah, I know what this is. I know that you know what this is, but in our own brains, those things diverge because I can't read your mind. I don't know what
right.
exactly you're thinking, so I can't intuit unless you've been working with somebody for a very long time and you have that
It's like,
like great working relationship. It's hard to intuit like into those things, but this gets us down the line, right? We have now chosen what we want to go and prototype based off of what is the risk. We've chosen what to prototype in terms of feature side of how do we build into a core loop, into a core gameplay loop later on, and try to plot a path through that through like high level feature design, high level ideas of what we're actually going to do. What is the content scale of this game if we're going to go and make it? Can I actually even make content for this thing? And then also, how do we narrow our ideas down and get more context and more structure up front with game pillars, with user goals, with design, with product goals. From here, then it comes down to the moment of the nitty gritty where it actually goes and says, okay, now you have to execute. Now you got to go in and do the fun stuff, which is like sit down and actually program some of those things and build those things out. Um, from there, like, how do you feel about singular, sitting in a singular feature and prototyping those things out for a while versus getting to the core game, to the core loop, as fast as you can?
I don't know. I mean, I think with the vertical slice approach, even though it's not like the best architecturally, I think it's the best motivationally. Let's say you're a solo dev. A lot of solo devs don't necessarily think about this angle early, but your motivation meter is needs to be juggled.
Mm.
So I do like to have successes and breadcrumbs and quick things to show people to keep you going forward. And obviously, for a real job, you're being paid to do it, so it's a little different. So that's my angle on that. How about you?
Yeah, no, I think what you put it into, into words, like it highlights the whole idea of get feedback early and often, right? As you're going through the thing, make sure that you are constantly getting feedback. You're constantly throwing things in front of your friends at the same time too. Anything to hold yourself accountable to something, to a deadline, to a moment. Like, oh, I haven't shown my mom my game in 3 weeks. It's like, okay, well, like maybe we need to have a progress update. People use dev blogs for these things, right? And then this is how then the start of building my community around my game and everything else like starts, right? Uh, I don't tend to focus on any of those things, but I don't think that that's necessarily the right thing to do either, because when the idea is really fresh and really new, and you don't know where you're going with it, and you don't know if you even want to turn it into something, I think that there's two different sides of this too. Like, we have to be cognizant of don't put a whole lot of process up front sometimes, especially when you're a solo dev. Like, just don't you don't need a whole lot of process. Just try to find the fun as fast as possible, right, within everything that you're doing. And if you can find the fun, great. Like, just keep building on top of fun. You have to evaluate like what is fun, and that's what all the pillars and supposed to or do. That's supposed to help direct you into finding the fun as quickly as possible. But um, making sure that you are getting feedback on everything that you are doing and kind of having something that holds you accountable to that, I think is extremely important. Um,
Yeah, I've certainly seen people that focus really like they're like very certain that they want the game to be this certain vision. They actually spend a lot of time on the architecture and not putting it in front of people. And actually, that's still I haven't seen as much success there as like they might think. Like they tend to be like, oh, you know what? I kind of have to pivot, and then like the architecture that they spent time on is like that was a tough cost for them.
yeah, I mean, these are the things where then you go and say, like, does my theme even matter now? Right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like, Robo Pirates in space. Like, great, cool, sounds
yeah.
awesome. You know what I mean? But, like, does that work in market? You know what I mean? Will people actually engage with that, right? Like, I think
Yeah.
a good one for me was always there was like a potato gunsmith game on Steam. I can't even remember the name of it now, but it was like you're like a potato that makes like medieval weapons.
Oh, yeah, yeah. It's like a Holy Potatoes game, probably. Uh, I know what you're talking about.
Yes.
Probably.
So like for me, it's like maybe there's a deeper community thing in there that again like I don't know about, like the Baba is you thing that I was fucking dumb as shit about, right? Um, but you know what I mean, you can go weird and wacky and find an audience there, but you have to now find that audience or build that audience or try to find a theme that actually like works in market a little bit more, and it helps you to kind of point your story vision or whatever your actual overarching vision is, because a lot of times like when I go and say, hey, I'm going to build a narrative game or a game that has narrative in it, I'm never actually really making, as we said in the last thing, I'm not making the narrative system. The narrative and everything is going to come later. Like, the world building and everything is going to be built on top of the world that I actually make in the first place, right? So we'll build some core mechanics, but we'll use little bits of narrative to try and like as we go. We're not going to like write a book and then go and build the game on the book. You know what I mean? Because that's too restrictive. You build the game piece by piece and then start trying to inject story on top of it and try to infer, okay, well, what does this mean in this world? What does this mean outside of this world? What does this mean to this town, this village? How does that build into the greater side of the world? Okay, great. Actually, that's an interesting thought pattern. Let's go and take that concept and start driving that around the game. Like, oh, okay, now we actually have something that feels very connected on the story, but still was built off of first principles of the game, what the game needs, the supporting of the game pillars, um, and kind of like continuing to move from there. So we're getting down into this moment now where we are building things, right? We are moving down these sides and building things. Um, in your opinion, how do you break yourself out of the funnel of going too deep or too long on one mechanic or one thing, right? Like, how do you say like I'm going to spend my time here this week or over here this week?
It does all come back to what you said about deadlines. For me, if you don't give yourself a deadline, I can and have just gone down a funnel and didn't hold myself accountable and just like kind of like just went deep, hit dead ends and kind of struggled. And it did take like stepping out of it and like recognizing deadlines and giving it
Mm-hmm.
yourself that.
Yeah.
So that's all I got, and I don't enforce deadlines enough on myself.
Do you have any ways that you start building deadlines into your stuff? Like, is it just you're doing sprints and it's always 2 week sprints and you're doing milestone? You're aiming for milestones.
Yeah, I got sprints and milestones, but since I'm the runner of my own company, I just ignore them when they're convenient.
That's
So
funny.
I will shamefully admit all of that.
No, I look, I get it. I,
If
I
you got advice, man, I'd love to hear it.
I think there's like a few different ways to like look at this, right? When we're going back to what we were talking about previously, when we're doing the upfront kind of game design side and trying to find our content scale and you know objectively in a spreadsheet looking down our feature list and trying to break this game down into its core components, really trying to just like line item, line item, line item, like what is it actually going to take to actually go and make this thing. That's when we go and start saying, okay, right, well, what's the things that I need to action upon now to go and build into this, as you say, a vertical slice, right? Into some core loop gameplay mechanic. We'll start in, I mean, that's the overarch goal. That's the big end one, big old milestone. We're going to chunk that a little bit more into a process tree. I put a if you actually have it in the Discord chat between the
Huh?
two of us, there was a Figma Jam picture
Oh,
that I sent you like last week.
yeah.
I don't know if you can scroll up to that one. It's just like
I'm scrolling.
it's called the iteration cycle.
Talk on it while I search for it.
Okay, well, it's this idea of when you are building designs, trying to like visualize a process for designing up front, building tasks, evaluating where they fit into the life cycle of your product, and then actually building across those things. Then you get into the testing phases, and then into the iteration phases for those things afterwards. And it's all about chunking this thing into 4 different sections: design, evaluation, um, building, iteration, and having that as your process cycle as you go through your entire thing. So it doesn't matter what milestone, like how long your milestones necessarily are, as long as you're kind of like building time for all of these different sections and trying to time box each individual area of these things, you can start to try to really make progress towards them all. Um,
Yeah.
is it not there? Really?
Can't find it, and it's not from last week.
Ah, shit. Okay.
And the last Figma thing I see is from like a year ago, so we just have to go.
Yeah. If I could bring it up, I might just put a
All
link
right.
into the. I'll put a link
Yeah.
into the chat so you can take a look at a picture for that. But those types of things, these, you know, what I mean, this is where process does help you, You know what I mean? I think having no process and just being three shifts to the wind is can be good for some and
Mhm.
can be good for some games, especially when you're just trying to do some experimental shit, especially when you're just trying to just like find the time around your own cycle. You don't want to get bogged down by the process, but you also don't want to beat yourself down by the process, right? Like when you miss a milestone, how do you feel in your own personal opinion?
The first few times pretty bad, but then you get used to it, and it kind of slides.
And that's a problem, right? Because that's where then you can fall into
Yeah,
deviancy, where you just
yeah,
all of a
yeah.
sudden you're like, well, now I'm just not making this game.
Well, Diablo's out. Well,
Yeah.
Street Fighter's out.
Well, we're not making a game anymore, and you haven't touched it in 3 months, and you're like,
Yeah, yeah.
shit. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's like you
Yeah.
put a bunch of effort into something to like design it up front, and yeah, sure, you did the brain exercise, but when we're trying to really make a product, when we are trying to make a game to get to market, we do have to be a little bit disciplined, a little bit regimented about these things, and
Yeah.
kind of hold ourselves accountable to certain things within these sites.
You know what? I have a new. I just thought of a new development model. That's
Do it.
right, groundbreaking. So you have your agile, you have some whatever else is out there. I'm gonna call this motivation first development.
Ooh,
That could be
nice.
a way to do, especially solo dev or small team dev, where you do have processes and whatever that are highly motivating and really good at giving small wins that continue you forward with momentum. I'll develop this model and we're gonna
Write 100
show it.
lines of code, get a cookie.
Yeah, yeah.
It
No,
might
no.
honestly work for
Hey,
me.
hey, yeah, dude. I'll
My
build like
fucking
a gamification thing around it, and I'll charge for it. That's right. That's my thing.
yeah, write that down. Write that down. That's an app.
Right,
That's
right.
a that's write that down. That's an app. Um, no, for real. Like this is these are all really just important things, right? They don't necessarily make the game, but they help you to make the game. Same thing with just some of the tooling around this type of thing. I don't think a lot of people put priorities and time into this stuff, but like making a Trello board, like taking your spreadsheet, make a Trello board, drive your tasks into there. The actual physicality I found, this was when I was working at EA as an intern, like way ago. Uh, all of our tasks and all of our epics and everything were being tracked, in software. But outside of that, we actually had a whiteboard with
I
sticky
agree.
notes,
Yeah,
and big post-it board was the epic, and then all of the sticky notes for all of the tasks were things. And when we actually had stand up, which is like a real thing, like what I mean, you're supposed to be in a lot of ways standing up and having some physicality to go and see progress move from point A to point B, and to see things go from on the board, in backlog, to
absolutely.
scheduled, to in progress, to in iteration, to play testable, to completed. That moving of those cards and seeing that progress really helps to drive motivation, especially across an
Absolutely.
entire team, more than anything else, right?
I
So
forgot about that, and that is something that I think I'll adopt. It feels great to just slam that sticky note on the finished part.
yeah, and it might sound I'm just thinking about it. We've been on this now 45 minutes or whatever, but it might sound like we're just like moving around the box and just kind of like not really kind of like hitting into it. Like where we're focusing on right now is not like building the game and building dev and doing all that, right? Like that happens. That's what's gonna happen, right? Like we're making the art, blah blah blah. You got to do that, but you have to have some structure and some pillars around it that are actually going to help you build that prototype. Now that you've evaluated what the thing is, what the design is, you've picked a chunk off of and said, I'm going to build this. And then you've gone and put that into some milestone or some goal that you said, I'm going to build towards this. Now you're focusing on what's actually going to get you to there, right? Rather than just like, oh, I did all that work and I'm not now going to action upon it, right? I'm not going to get to those end points, because I think that this is like some of the things you'll learn very fucking fast in a creative field, or you should learn, is especially in fucking games. Like so many people get into this for the like, kind of the wrong reasons, I think, in a lot of ways, right? Or like you start off getting into it for the wrong reasons, where you're like,
Yeah, I
I
agree.
love games, I love playing games. Making something is fucking hard.
Yeah.
It's a pain in the goddamn ass. It is literally like for forever and a day I've had that, this is fine dog, as my Slack thing, for forever, because you are just in the flames. You're honestly, there are fires all around you, and you just have to be like, sweet, that's broke, awesome, cool, let's deal with that, and just kind of
And
like,
while things are breaking, you're seeing competitors with your same game concept coming out, and you're like, man, they are a year ahead of us. Like the flame just erupts.
and you're like, how am I gonna fucking make money off this?
Yeah.
I'm spending all my fucking time on this.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be maybe thinking about hiring a contractor to go and build art against this. I'm gonna spend, what the fuck? Like, how do I? All of these things break into your mentals. You have to love the process. You have to love the shit. You know what I mean? Game developers call them war stories for a bloody reason. They genuinely, like, it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to be a solo. It's a hard, very lonely experience. Nobody knows what you're trying to do. Nobody understands the efforts and the lengths that you're going into to put this thing
And
together.
yeah, and your community is like, so when's the game coming out? Like every other day.
If you even have a community,
Yeah.
if you even have that, if you even have a supporting structure, you got to build it, and you got to hope that people resonate with your game idea. And those are some of the first eval moments where I would say is like, make a GIF, go to Reddit, what I mean, polish something up to visual standard, make a 30-second GIF, throw it online. Do you get a lot of upvotes? Do people like the idea of it? Great. Drive them in, call to action. Drive them into your wish list page. Drive them, I mean, if you go down those routes in mobile, we would build those, we would actually do a lot of things up front where you're building fake pages where you take an idea, a game idea, you build your 5-panel images. You might do like a very rudimentary trailer for the game, like a fake, and make it a fake company and a fake game, put it up on the Google App Store, and then run some ads against it, so that you can then, when you're running ads against like 5 different game ideas where they're all within the same thing, which one performs the best. It can also help you to hit your theme and your tone of what you're actually doing. Later on, you can do the same thing within the art style as well too, so you can then like find which art style resonates the best within the market, so you can actually go and like really turn those wheels and really like find what you want. What is the real direction based on market focus, not based off of objective, what do I actually want to make, what do I want to do. And I think that those are big differences on the independent game side when I'm trying to make something that's like me and holistically me and the thing that I want to make, versus what is commercially viable within this space, what do people want, how do I actually resonate with people within those spaces. Plenty of ways to skin that cat, but you do that more up front. Once you have that game idea, you don't even build the prototypes, you build art around it, and then do those advertising things, and then then start building prototypes from there. But it's kind of going back now, I guess, as well too. So all right, we're building up now, we're building into that first playable. Once we get towards these things, what should we be doing? Right, we've gotten a little bit of gameplay together. We've actually gone and maybe prototyped 3 or 4 different versions of the same mechanics. How do we go and evaluate what is the thing that's going to move forward into production? Say like, these 3 go away, this is the one that we're going to keep moving forward with.
Probably just the playtesting portion.
Yeah.
And there are different levels of playtesters. I talk about this, I rant about this. I'm pretty sure I ranted about this last time, which is some playtesters are just not great at the early stages if you only got squares and triangles. So first things is to identify at least your free friends who can, give decent advice. But then, as you get broader and get later down the line, you do need new playtesters and some anonymous playtesters.
Yeah, I think there's levels to this game. Individuals and friends important. Colleagues, I think, is where you start first.
Yeah.
Then you kind of go to get your friends involved. I've got colleagues of mine right now that run playtests weekly for their new board game ideas, and they invite the people over to their house and they do like a little family dinner, and we play a board game, and they don't play. They just sit there with an iPad and just watch, and just take notes, and don't say anything. Don't make any sort of don't tell people about the game. See where people are going wrong, make those notes, and then make adjustments either really in the moment or or at the end within your next iteration cycle. Right? Like this is planning for iteration. This is when you're trying to put things in front of people. Once you're out of all of that cycle, right, and you kind of feel like you have something that's in a decent place, or you want better testers, because you have to remember, like, friends are, and family will lie to you. Like they
Yeah.
just will lie to you, you know,
Yep.
and
Yep.
that sucks. It sucks that that's the case, but they do love you. They do, but they can't be. Not many of them can be objective the way that another designer can be objective, another individual, but an actual rando who you don't know, oh shit, they'll if they find something, they'll rip in, you know?
Yeah.
They will
And
rip in.
if they're a rando and you're standing near them, like, hey, would you like to try my game? That will also pollute their
It
feedback.
will absolutely also pollute their feedback. You will see it on their face if they're not interested instantly, and that's important to try to hit in as well too. I sent you a couple of links here.
Yeah, I'll bring them
If you
up.
can bring at least one of them up, right? So if we're trying to get external feedback and we have a bit of money, this is where I would go first. I think is which link did you click first? The top one. Calvin died. The first one we go to is Playtest Cloud. Playtest Cloud, if you have a little bit of money.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back. No video, but he crashed out instantly. What happened?
I saw
He saw the light and just went straight towards it.
it was like discord.exe is initializing. Let me try that again. And if I crash, cover for me.
Okay, I am.
Keep talking, keep talking.
Yeah. So the first one I would say is like, let's go to Playtest Cloud, right?
Okay. Cool, I'm in.
If you have a little bit of money, Playtest Cloud is a great place to go. If you're on the commercial side, this is an awesome resource to use. What you do is you pay for credits that gets you players to come in and play your game. You implement their SDK into your product, and by doing so, they can be recording. You're recording all of the clicks that the user makes, all of the sound that they're doing. So they uses the microphone. These playtesters are encouraged and told that they must be talking as they play. And it's very important for them to go and actually do that, because you're trying to get objective feedback from players that are also within your core audience segments. And you'll get into that when you actually go and pay for it. You jump in, you sign a survey, you say, like, who is this game for, blah blah blah. These people source those players from their own, from their own bases, and those people then go and actually, like, talk through those games as they're playing them. It's great because these all come down straight into Playtest Cloud. If you do a 7-day engagement with like a couple of different individuals and pay for that kind of longevity study, you can get a little bit more time than just the 30 minutes that they might play the game in front of you or away from you. You'll actually get that moment of, do they return to the game? Are they enjoying returning to the game? And how is that all working out, like, over a longer period of time and fitting within their lifestyle? Now, the big thing to remember is that people are paid to play the game, so they can have that skew of, oh yeah, this is a nice game, this is a great game, but you'll get some people who are very objective and can will tell you, like, this is good, this is bad, but you'll be able to infer and find UI and flow problems where like players just don't understand a feature, or they click on things and things don't work, and you're like, ah, well, this fucking sucks. The videos all go into the Playtest Cloud network. You can annotate those. You share them with your team. Everybody can then go and discuss these key points where you see problems within players actually playing the game right there in real time and over a long period of time. And I think that that's a great service to have. Period.
Yeah,
Uh,
you can see their taps if I remember right. And I've seen people struggle in our tutorial, and then we knew like what parts of our tutorial we needed to change.
yeah, yeah. It's really great for early funnel stuff, but getting them over that like period of time is great as well too.
Yeah.
The second one, then, if you're more, if you don't really have the budget, but you have a little bit of cash, or you want to have a little bit of cash, this is also a bigger. This is great for, I would say, is like the independent side of things, and for more Steam games and things like that as well too. Right? Is G Round. G Round is a very interesting platform built off of a European company that's also an incubator and accelerator fund that is global, called Global Top Round. They're one and the same, but like two facets of two facets of a different company. You submit your game to G Round. You do a couple of conversations with them. You try to see who, like if you can get into there, if they actually even want your game in their thing, and they put you into their ecosystem of games. During those times, you see here, there's only a set amount of games that are actually alive and playable for a certain amount of time. During that time, users within that ecosystem, they're not getting paid to play necessarily. There are all live streamers and a couple of other people who are set up to, they'll be set up and scheduled to actually play your game live on Twitch and try to see what the numbers will be, and see how much engagement in terms of community engagement you can get there, on top of just individual players playing your game. You see here that this little like button, that's like a little hearts button, is a part of the representation of like, how well you're doing. But those games are only going to last for, I think it's like 2 weeks or something like that, right? They're March 30th to April. Oh, that's even longer than 2 weeks. It's almost like a month, right? They sit up online with just these other games. So you're being ranked against marketability of all of the other games that are in your share. You're also then trying to then outperform them within those segments, and you're also then if you do well, you can have these conversations with them later on of like, okay, hey, look at this engagement that I got, look at all this wish list stuff that I got off of this. Let's go to GTR now. Let's go to the Global Top Round. Can we move over to there and get accelerator funding to actually then push us into a bigger category? Can we then start trying to really like hone this thing in and get that last bit of funding to get the last 90%? I think this is great for games that have a great demo, right? So when you're building towards that vertical slice and you've really paid attention, you put some effort into where you want to be, stylistically and everything else. You don't have to have a full game to be in this position, but you do have to have a very hardcore slice of the game to be ready. And I would say that any of these things, when you're in the paid side of things, is definitely like the place. That's what you need to be thinking about, is like when you're getting to that first playable, to that vertical slice, to that demo, and really have something polished. This is when you actually go and say like, okay, now how do I engage into funds like this? There are other platforms that are like this, but this is the one that I've personally used, and it's worked out in the past. Yeah.
That's pretty crazy. I've never seen this before.
Mm-hmm.
So this, like for example, this game, I just kind of clicked around a little. I saw this game has the most likes out of the few I clicked. But this is a game that I've seen on Steam. So maybe they like ran a test here first, and they're like, okay, now let's shift over to Steam.
Yeah, take a look, right? So they were probably already on Steam. So I don't know if you want to bring up your Steam, I can.
No, I don't.
Okay. Well, can you just do it through the browser, steampowered.com?
No.
Are you logged in over there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, whatever. Um, but
It's over there. You guys can
yeah,
check
yeah,
it
yeah,
out.
we can take a look. But there are avenues for all of these things. I think this gets you up through the prototyping phase into the vertical slice area. It gives you a process. You know, we can close this now. But I think that this all gives you a process of how to go from having an idea, having a bunch of ideas, honing those things down, evaluating those designs as you go, and having something like the pillar systems to actually go and drive your teams around, yourself around, and try to hone those ideas again a little bit more, refine, work down those lists, build a process pipeline, build a motivation pipeline, build yourself something core, give yourself a goal later down the line, give yourself a goal. Have some stakes in the ground of what this game is and what it's going to be. Don't be so loosey goosey in a lot of places. Just try to find something to rally around. Once you get there, then you're aiming towards that vertical slice. However you get there, however you want to get there, but having something polished, something playable, something that you can put in front of players early and often, I think is extremely important to go down there. Again, if you're on the commercial side and on the mobile side, you can be doing that without even putting code down. You can be doing these fake game tests. You can to try and find your style. You can be doing the market research to try and find your hole within the market, and then kind of like continuing to go from there and build towards something, plus wanting another game or
If
something.
you're a total indie, there are lots and lots of meetups and groups in your city. I know, no matter where you are, I can almost guarantee there's like some group within a 30-minute radius,
Yeah,
more or less.
yeah, yeah. But I think that takes us to about an hour or so. I think the next one, I mean, this was supposed to be a two-parter, but the next one, I think from here, like, what do we actually do? Is it going then from playable to to like full production to everything else like that, like hiring in the
If
team, like trying to hire in a couple of people, like evaluating your own designs, looking at metrics or anything else like that, or
if you're this far, you are in pretty good shape. I think. I
yeah,
think the first two, the phases we've talked about are the meat of the difficulty. I think, although it's not totally true. The last 10% is like actually
heinous.
90% of the work,
Yeah,
or whatever the polish phase. It is tough, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have too much to say on polish myself, other
no,
than endure the suck.
endure the suck. Yeah, just endure the suck. There's loads of different ways to go about it. Randy, I hope that follows on from your questions. If anybody did like any of this stuff, please put a comment down below. What do you think we're missing here? What is your experience with any of these types of things? And also, just if you have, dissenting opinions, please put them down there too. If you don't believe in what we're talking about, tell us, because there's not just one way to skin this at all. We all understand that. It's just that throughout our careers, these are the types of things that have helped us to get to where we wanted to go, which is get through that suck and get the games out, get them there, into a position where they're actually playable and everything like that.
And
Uh,
if you have further questions, toss them down there as well. We loved addressing this one. This one was fun.
Absolutely. Share it around as well too. We all appreciate that. Last video got 66 views, which is averagely more than what we actually get a lot of the time.
We had a party over here.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, whatever. But one more subscriber, I'll take that one more subscriber. Thank you very much for subscribing. At some point, I will do this at the front of the fucking video and not at the end. But whatever. What you gonna do? All right, Calvin. Thank you very much for your time. All right.
All right. Later.
Later, dude. Enjoy yourself.